So tonight, brandish your guns, your knives, and your fists. Seek out your oppressors wherever they are and tell them, we don't want nothing, not a thing from you. Tonight, we show those that sow the wind that we are the whirlwind.
We're not gonna take it. No, we ain't gonna take it. We're not gonna take it.
You, son! Yes, you! Do you enjoy metal corridors, copy and pasted enemies, and a plot that has you reaching for a rope and a wonky chair? If your answer was yes, then Wolfenstein II is a game for you. For everyone else, this game sucks! This has to be one of the laziest games I have ever played, and I have a full list of reasons as to why Wolfenstein II isn't just a bad sequel, but a bad action title overall. Number 1. Uber Commanders. Conceptually, the idea of the Uber Commanders makes logical sense in the overarching story of Wolfenstein II, and is a concept inspired by Call of Duty Infinite Warfare, in which we embarked on a side quest to eliminate the remaining enemies that escaped our grasp. The difference between Call of Duty's commanders and Wolfenstein's, however, is but a simple one, dear child. Call of Duty put effort into making each character look distinct and each battle engaging. The mission could be a rip-roaring fight through the stars in our galaxy, or a stealth encounter on an enemy vessel, using whichever gimmick the game has introduced. The missions never felt monotonous. On the other hand, Wolfenstein tasks you with killing the same character model 20 times over, including commanders, whom all look the same by the way. It never ends. By the 9th time of you ripping the legs off a Nazi officer, you start to come to the realization that the developers didn't want to do this part of the game one bit. Furthermore, in the aforementioned Call of Duty, each combatant would utilize a different weapon and combat style to keep the fighting fresh. Over on the Wolfenstein II front, however, you could call them Ash Williams, because these boomstick fools will only use one weapon, and that's a grenade launcher with a wide stance, like they're auditioning for some sort of 90s boy band. Take that, Machine Games. If games are truly meant to make you feel something, then I feel like Bill Murray in Groundhog's Day. Number 2. Road Trip or Road Shit. A great man probably once said, "How do you make a painting boring?" And the answer is to fill it with grey. That same man probably pondered, how do you make America small and yet again boring? And the whispers in his head answered back, to fill it with grey metal structures and not explore the diversity. With Wolfenstein 2, I was under the impression we would be taking a road trip throughout the heartland of America and stabbing the Nazi heart along with it. America is a massive place for an Englishman looking in. There's snowy mountains, clear lakes, large cities and small towns. So it comes across as a bit lazy when the developers paint everything grey and say, that's it. It's not due to incompetence either, since this is the same team that brought us the New Order. When you hear someone talk about how the sequel is worse than the original, they're normally talking about a movie, not a multi-million-pound video game. The New Order took us around the world, from London to Berlin and back, and each mission looked awe-inspiring, with a fine care given into the smaller details. The sequel, on the other hand, looks more like it's been stuck together in Doom's Snap Map Creator and then sold for $60. If Wolfenstein 2 is equivalent to anything, it's probably going to be 50 Shades of Grey, because that also has a BG in it. Number 3. Mission Insatiable. Let's talk about set pieces. Whether you're Nathan Drake or the female equivalent Lara Croft, every action game on the market needs those popcorn poppers to excite the player and have you talking about the game long after the credits have rolled and you've ejected the disc and most likely taken it to a second-hand store to try to make some extra cash. It's a way to discuss the finer points of the game's mechanics and make a killing off YouTube if you know what you're talking about. The first Wolfenstein that kicked off this reboot started with your character shooting down planes, jumping from one flaming inferno to another, getting chased by a metal dog, and then scaling up a castle wall while Nazis shot at you from open windows before the plane you started in crashes into the castle and you fall inside the building. If that's not an action set piece that adds to the game's momentum and theme, then I don't know what is. It's such a full, conversationless, foreshadowed piece that Game Maker's Toolkit could probably make a video on just the first 4 minutes alone of the New Order and still have room for another video describing the intricacies as to why this first level lets the player know what they're in for. Again, Wolfenstein II opens its curtains on a wheelchair as you lethargically wander each metal hallway like a steampunk version of The Shining, only to slowly wheel yourself down yet another hallway. I should have known that this game wouldn't be filled with action moments, but since I was duped by the buzzword marketing, I pushed on. Pun intended. After completing the game, the only part that can be considered a bombastic action moment is riding the Panzerhund, but even that can be taken out by regular grunts. As for the crisis suit abilities that you are given later on in the game, for reasons I won't say here due to spoilers, even those don't add anything to the overall experience and instead registers the clunkiness of the game's movement system. This is less Crisis from Critque and more Crisis from Live Aid. Number 4. The storybook to make you sleep. Wolfenstein: The New Order was the first attempt to bring brevity and wit to our desensitized non-subjective puppet in the form of B.J. Blazkowicz. The team toyed with psychological trauma and post-traumatic stress that a battle-hardened fighter would go through and sugared his tale with an engaging overarching plot, tangible goals and plenty of camp schlock. This treatment wasn't just limited to our main protagonist either, as the cast that built up the New Order's extravagant altered history also had flaws, a backstory, and a life worth living. Even our enemies got the full 9 yards, with our main antagonist having a clear reason to pursue. Superb character development made it easy to follow the progression system that blended so effortlessly into the gameplay. Wolfenstein II, on the other hand, is the antithesis of banal, boring, underdeveloped characters. It's kinda like my voice, only in video game format. You could replace the entirety of Wolfenstein II's cast with cardboard cutouts and have just about as much character building. A quick rundown of the fundamental bare emotions goes as followed. BJ misses Caroline, which you wouldn't have guessed after hearing him say her name more times than a nun says the Lord's Prayer. The group don't trust the Amy Schumer looking German girl, because her mother is the main antagonist. And does she finally make a stand for her mother and fight her face to face? No, you got about as much chance of seeing that as you do seeing the man in the moon flip you off. She just tells the group not to call her Nazi anymore, which is pretty anticlimactic after the momentous build-up of the intrinsically forming plot. The wacky scientist plays with a guard key and tantalizes the player with portal guns and anti-gravity weapons that you never see. And our main antagonist becomes more elusive than a 5-pence piece in a metal factory, as she does nothing throughout the plot until she turns up for fortuitous reasons just to remind the player she's still a threat. Certain points throughout the new Colossus' mismatched structure feels anachronical and with so many loose threads and plot points left unanswered by the time the credits roll, my intuition tells me this isn't the finished script and the developers have lost the last pages. But surely that's just the base of the argument, that the characters couldn't act in a school play even if the rest of the actors were mute and their parents were held at gunpoint. I'm sure there's some good story beats. Sadly, yet again, the answer is a resounding no. In the New Order, we encapsulated each inch of the human psyche and provided due diligence in the form of human psychology. The analytical nature meant that every emotion was displayed perfectly in one concise package. We saw love, loss, hate and joy in the 30 hours we spent shooting Nazis in the head. From the horrors of a concentration camp that incentivized your hatred towards the Nazis and your secondary antagonist, to the care and love of the primal romantic interest, even down to the sombre death of a German man and his mentally ill friend. Everything is given care and enough reasons to feed into the narrative structure and gameplay loop cohesively. There's more to maturity than putting an M rating on your box art and relying on blood and breasts. The New Order kept those shocking twists coming and never stopped until the developers told us the game is over and you have to exit this ride. And even then, you're talking about this story like it was the Citizen Kane of our generation. Wolfenstein II, however, picks one emotion and sticks to it like a fly to shit. Depression is the word of the day, and throughout the running time, both metaphorically speaking and literally speaking there, the game showcases dour moment after dour moment. Tonally, it's an inept mess, with spikes of humour only coming in by the third act, and the first two acts filtering between boring and monotonous missions and uncharismatically lunar narrative structuring. Would it kill BJ to tell a joke? Well, I guess it does. Number 5. Everything the first game did better, which makes this one lazy. They say time makes fools of us all, and usually that saying has a purpose, given that time can make our perception change and our memory fade. Some experiences may be clouded by nostalgia or rose-tinted glasses. However, if you've watched up to this point, which I hope you did because this took for frickin' ages, and you're thinking I'm gonna pull the rug out from under you with a magnificent twist and say Wolfenstein II is great, then yeah, you've been in the wrong mindset, because Wolfenstein II is truly a terrible game and an abysmal sequel. So bad in fact you could probably call this Die Hard 6 and be none the wiser. I thought I would keep all these reasons for the finale, so here, without further ado, is reasons why Wolfenstein 1 was way better than its lackluster follow-up. First up, let's discuss missions a bit more. While Wolfenstein 2 opts for the claustrophobic corridor approach, Wolfenstein the New Order's missions were a blast from the past, offering up a more open-ended structure with side objectives to complete. A perfect example is within the game's opening act. There's a massive bipedal machine that's stomping around the battlefield, and turrets shooting you from enclosed bunkers. The game allows you to simply take out one turret and then press on, keeping the free-flowing momentum moving and urging you towards your final goal. The missions can be either bite-sized or a full-course meal. Because if you decide to snoop around like Sherlock Holmes at a crime scene, you will find out you can destroy all the turrets, and furthermore, after taking out the AA guns you need to progress, you can then utilize those same weapons to take out the massive metal machine. On a further point, missions in the New Order gave you an incentive to return, as each mission was jam-packed with secrets as a love letter to its predecessor. In the first mission alone, you can take a detour once you're inside the compound and venture off the beaten path to find a room with 3 switches in it. Behind you, etched into the wall, is German writing. From this you deduce that there is an order to the switches, and once you work the puzzle out, a wall opens beside you. Going inside unlocks not just a piece of unsorted collectible, but a valuable weapon upgrade part that makes the mission easier to stealth through. Later on, in that same mission, you come to a spiral staircase with a massive picture of your main antagonist perched up on the wall between two swords. You notice that one sword is at an angle, so you go closer to inspect it, only to be prompted to move the sword into its correct position. Doing so opens a secret entrance which leads you to the commander, whom is sitting alone on the phone in his office. This concept was used again in another big Bethesda action extravaganza in the form of Doom 2016, in which searching the areas would yield rewards and secret weapons for the player to test early on. I still remember the feeling of attaining the assault weapon by the second mission and blasting my way through demons with ease. On a counterpoint, Wolfenstein II has none of this. There are no secret areas, there are no hidden weapon caches, and absolutely no real open areas to explore, apart from probably your hub, but even that's more open than a Mormon's legs. Speaking of secrets, let's talk about how 2 gave us a middle finger and 1 gave us more content. Yep, it's time to discuss that vault. This is Bethesda, and one thing they know how to make is a buggy game. A vault interesting. Fans eagerly waited for this door to open with the promise of secrets galore, and so the wild goose chase began. Fans compared it to the first game, believing that the vault would hold cheat codes and extra modes. Others thought new weapons, and the answer was a middle finger. Yes, the vault unlocked, and we were greeted by a machine that tells us to buy the DLC content. I haven't hated a machine this much since the T600 and Gladys from Portal, but at least they were meant to be hated. Now let's talk about what the first game did. Throughout each mission you can find enigma pieces scattered around the level. Finding these hidden collectibles gets you new modes and difficulty settings to mess around with. From easy to hard to slow motion to fast, these added an extra layer and more hours onto the already long playtime. You know what I love about DVDs apart from selling them out my jacket pocket in dark alleys around about 2 o'clock on a Sunday? It's finding that chapter select screen and watching my favourite scene over and over again. You know what Wolfenstein II loves? Forgetting to add this feature. In Wolfenstein 1, like any action game on the market, you can select which mission you want to replay and play it until your heart's content. Wolfenstein 2, on the other hand, makes you play the entirety of the game over again, even if you just want to watch one cutscene or play that one awesome part. This is made even more perplexing considering your hub area has a club in it with a projector setup and a jukebox in the corner, both of which you can't interact with. My favourite games are those that accommodate the playstyle of the gamer and allow bountiful amounts of player agency. In Assassin's Creed Origins, you can go from Dark Souls to Thief in a matter of seconds. In Crisis, you can play the traditional way or the tank way. And even in Mario Odyssey, the game allows players to decide whether platforming is more fun than possession. Wolfenstein 2 doesn't do anything for your playstyle. The movement feels more clunky and confined than the Tin Man with rusty Parkinson's. In the original, it was frantic, frenetic and fluid. It was the video game equivalent of Usain Bolt on laxatives. After gaining access to your exoskeleton later on in Wolfenstein 2, I was assuming the game would open up, and in all fairness my expectations gravitated towards Crisis with Nazis, but I was wrong. The shoulder tackle makes it nigh on impossible to hit enemies unless they're standing right in front of you like a dog waiting for a treat. The walker ability doesn't allow you to climb up anywhere only on Pacific surfaces, which can become a real pain in the arse in the New Orleans section when you need to cross a small river laden with bodies, only to find the only way out of this is through a busted bus to the left. And the crawl ability becomes clunky and expositional when you need to walk up to a wall, hit the crouch button, and the character plays a pre-canned animation. I've seen babies crawl better than this, and this John Cena lookalike looks nothing to me like a baby, even though Daddy Can I Play is a difficulty setting. And as for the stealth system, it's not even worth talking about, as it just doesn't work. I'm all for trying out new mechanics that don't merge well with the game you're trying to create, but for God's sake, at least put some effort in. Case in point, Fallout 4 added base building, and yet as silly as that sounds, it works and becomes fun. Stealth, the cornerstone of any action game, doesn't even work in what I assumed was meant to be an action game. To bring this full circle, the New Order had a perfect balance of stealth versus movement. You can run, slide, hop, jump and stealth kill enemies until the cows came home, and these cows are going straight to McDonald's. Now, one of the most important things about an action title is having more lead than a steel mill. You need a large variety of weapons so you don't get bored early on. Bayek from Assassin's Creed Origins could open up an antiquity store with the amount of swords, shields and other garments he acquires throughout his journey. BG from Wolfenstein II can fill a small spice rack with the minimal selection of weapons on display. To crunch the numbers, Wolfenstein II gives you 8 weapons in total, with variants of each found throughout the mission. Wolfenstein The New Order gave us 13 main weapons and a few special side weapons to play with and dished them out accordingly. On top of that, they put more effort into how their melee system worked. In the second game you can only use your hatchet at pre-designated areas, i.e. to open up a vent to progress or as a takedown strategy. Wolfenstein The New Order had no time for single-use items and fleshed out its melee system. Not only can the knife be equipped as a weapon, which is a cheeky nod to Wolfenstein 3D, but it also has alternative attack modes. Pressing a button on your controller will flip the knife in BJ's hand from upwards to downwards, giving different takedown kills and alternative animations. But as Crocodile Dundee so elegantly put it, call that a knife? This is a knife. As the New Order allows you to dual wield melee weapons, you can run around the level like Freddy Krueger, slicing and dicing your foes with dual wielded knives. And on top of that, the weapon wheel for these interactions is streamlined. Getting a weapon in your hand and taking out an enemy is as quick as clicking your fingers. On the other side, Wolfenstein 2 doesn't want you to dual wield hatchets, because who wants that fun? And the weapon wheel the sequel opts for is both confusing and convoluted. You see, instead of selecting a weapon and then shooting the enemy, in the sequel you can dual wield a shotgun in one hand and a silenced pistol in the other. But since the stealth system is broke, using a pistol becomes futile and negates the point of stealth. So, scenario. You're in a firefight and you bring up the weapon wheel, only to see an empty slot. You hover over it and it brings up your second hand instead of a missing weapon. Well, this point here is pretty self-explanatory, but for the sake of talking, I'll delve a little deeper. You see, a weapon wheel should be easy. The first game categorizes its weapons into slots. You bring up a single weapon, press Y, and boom, there's dual weapons. The sequel has you faffing around with this two-hand structure that can get you killed relatively fast on the hardest difficulty setting, as you accidentally equip the wrong weapon to take out your opponent in the haste of battle. Now what about the men behind those triggers? Well, Wolfenstein II decided to go for a cookie cutter approach to its enemy design, with one half Killzone looking commanders and the other half yellow Despicable Me looking blobs. The Uber commanders are a conjunction in and of themselves, as the information given about them and their picture on the kill board has completely nothing to do with the enemy you end up fighting. A prime example is after looking on the kill board, I read up about this fat general that needed assassinating. I decoded the necessary information on the Enigma machine and headed off to kill him. Grace Walker, the Black Panther affiliated rebel that assists you on your quest, tunes in with some exposition about how much it would mean to kill this son of a bitch. Do it for me, she uttered, to give you motivation to continue, so I plodded on, with thoughts of taking out this Elmer Fudd looking fool. Only to find out by the end of the mission another skinny brown-haired Nazi officer sporting a grenade launcher, which I thought was funny, considering the photo showed a fat bald man. I could suspend my disbelief for the fact that this man may be hitting the slim fast aisle at his local supermarket, but to now be sporting a different eye colour, voice and hairline is a bridge too far. So what about the New Order? Well, there's a larger cast of throwaway characters and a variety of different enemy types. You have ground troops which dress differently each mission, commanders look differently each mission and actually add up to what their bio shows, and then there's the fleshed out mini encounters. Like in the second mission, you're in a bed recovering when a Nazi officer, whom bears a striking resemblance to Speckler from Malcolm in the Middle, bursts into the room and starts shooting the doctors. From then you run around this hospital until you find your main man and take him for a drive, which culminates with this one-eyed bandit getting the wrong end of a chainsaw. And let's end this with the quote I started with. Time makes fools of us all can be used to sum up Wolfenstein's The New Order in a metaphorical way, as the game spans multiple time periods and key moments throughout history. We go from 1940 to 1960 and back, with each time zone being given smaller details and historically specific tools. You know you're in the 1940s when stone triumphs over metal, and the Thompson can be classed as cutting-edge weaponry. You know you're in the 1960s when a Beetle car can be called a reliable form of transport. Each time you visit these zones, you are immersed in the world building and the lingo the characters use. Wolfenstein II could be set in the same year as Futurama, and no one would bat an eyelid, as each level feels rushed with metal corridor after metal corridor. The game actually takes place in 1960s America, but apart from a few throwaway racist slurs at the beginning of the game, you wouldn't know. Wasn't the 60s not the rise of free love, the Black Panther movement, segregation and police brutality? Wasn't this a time when one great man had a dream and the Cold War edged closer to the American front? Didn't America not fight in Vietnam in the summer of the 60s? Wasn't Jimi Hendrix not blowing minds of the creative guitar licks he was doing? Wasn't the churches not divided by controversy? Why is none of this mentioned or even hinted at? Oh yeah, that's right, because that would take research and time. And the most laziest thing of all is the fact that Hitler, the numero uno of World War II, the personification of this iconic brand, is utilised as a throwaway cameo for less than 10 minutes. This isn't Will Smith in Anchorman 2. You can't just throw a big name in here for a cheap laugh. They have done multiple antagonists in the past before, with the New Order remaining the prime example. General Deathhead, Irene and Buddy, along with a few underlings, are given centre stage and built early on. And for fans of this series, they know the mythology and lore of General Deathhead to be on board from the game's opening credits. Even Irene gives a Voz-worthy performance, which solidifies her as a mainstay for the Wolfenstein franchise. Wolfenstein II is a bit like Jerry Lewis being interviewed by a Hollywood reporter. It just doesn't care. All that time building up Irene, killing her pleasure toy, destroying her face, and what does she do? Well, in the first game, she found out your base of operations and went full Scarface on your ass, killing off multiple main characters like an 80s slasher flick. In the new Colossus, she doesn't kill that many, nor does she pursue you, and you would have thought an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth mentality would have fueled her vengeance towards BJ Blazkowicz, but it doesn't. I was expecting her to shoot your pregnant wife in the stomach, killing your children, the only thing BJ wants, since that's a side plot and has a main purpose in the game, and she does end up in the heat of battle quite a few times. That would have been the tipping point for BJ to go back to his murderous, uncaring, reckless ways of Nazi killing, but it doesn't happen. I was expecting a larger emphasis on her German daughter, creating intrigue and mystery as to whether or not she is in fact a Nazi spy, and this was all an inside job. They even given her this characteristic to become this plot point, and yet again I was disappointed, and quite frankly, the way that they use her character comes across as a bit of a racist stereotype. If someone like me can come up with these plot points which would have added a larger personality to our central antagonist, then how come a skilled team of developers working for 4 years couldn't come up with these obvious story beats? And going back to Hitler, which is a sentence I thought I'd never say, all I can say is, thank you, Machine Games, for telling the fans what our Christmas present is, because now when Wolfenstein 3 comes out, I won't even need to take off the wrapping paper to guess who our main villain is. And to really put the cherry on this googled picture of a cake is the fact they reuse assets so fecklessly. By the time you reach the second mission, you already know the end, and I mean that literally. The end is a shot-for-shot reskin of the second mission, down to the same enemy placements and the same route you take throughout the mission. It isn't even just taking the piss, it's stratospherically taking the piss and then dumping said urine and fecal matter all over the consumer as they deposit your hard-earned money into their bank accounts. I have never let a game get to me before, because after all they are used as an escapism tool to block out real-world problems. And even though a while back I may have made some points about things that I thought were bad in Uncharted 4, they fixed them months later in The Lost Legacy. Ubisoft fixed The Division and Siege to become critically acclaimed shooters in their own right, but Wolfenstein 2 has annoyed me beyond this video and even beyond words. This might be the longest video I've ever cobbled together. But you know what, Machine Games and Bethesda Software? Even after a major operation and having zero money, I have still put effort into this. So what's your excuse? In conclusion, if the New Order is a quintessence of this brand, then Wolfenstein 2 is a blocked toilet filled with a quantifiable amount of good ideas that didn't flush. Wolfenstein 2 is a lazy attempt to bank on an iconic name. In the New Order, we explored the horrors of war, laughed at our Quentin Tarantino-esque characters, and travelled the globe with each location acting as a blooded postcard to our photo album. If you want a fantastic story and a great action title from Bethesda this year, then buy Prey or Doom, because this game should be returned to Castle Wolfenstein until the team can add some fun and care into this once great series. Anyway, the 2009 remake was better than this game. Ooh, now that's a sick burn. Actually, being serious for a while, I think I may need to go on the run. because my 85-year-old neighbour just heard me shout the words Hitler, Nazi and New World Order followed by good BJs around about 500 times. Yeah, I think I'm gonna be in prison for quite a long time. May get a nice tattoo, may get it on the right arm as well, you know, so I can walk into pubs and say, look at this, and they go, that looks shit, and I go, yeah it does, but I went to prison for it, so fuck you. Alright, I'm off now, so I hope you enjoyed, but you know, you probably didn't, so I hope it didn't waste too much of your time. If you want to support the channel, you can do something like, I don't know, enjoy your life, because I am not going to force you to do any Patreon. I'm not going to force you to like it or comment, because that sounds a bit needy, doesn't it? Anyhow, bye.